The Seduction of the Golden Age, a meditation on empire, revival, and the wheel of history. There exists a profound, almost visceral sorrow that descends upon societies when the currents of history appear to flow against them. Few impulses in human history are as powerful or as enduring as the longing for a lost golden age. Civilizations that once commanded the center of world events often develop an almost sacred emotional relationship with their past. When power wanes, memory ceases to be mere recollection and transforms into a living symbol of dignity, identity, and latent possibility. The past is no longer just history, it becomes a mythic reservoir from which a people believe they can draw the strength to reverse decline. This idea of past glory rarely remains passive nostalgia or fleeting regret. Instead, it crystallizes into a consuming existential yearning for resurrection, the fervent conviction that ancestral achievements once forged through effort and virtue can be reclaimed by emulating those forebears, purifying communal life, enforcing moral discipline, and summoning collective will. In the Jewish tradition, for instance, the Golden Age was often projected into the future rather than fixed in the past. Yet ancient defeats such as the Babylonian exile in 586 BCE or the Roman destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE were interpreted theologically. The people and their leaders blamed themselves for covenantal failures, viewing catastrophe as divine punishment for straying from God's path. Prophets like Jeremiah framed exile not as random misfortune, but as a call to repentance and eventual restoration, embedding the idea that moral renewal could summon a messianic return to glory. This pattern of self-blame and redemptive hope recurs across cultures. In the Muslim world, the lament resonates with particular intensity and poetic urgency. Many perceive a stark contrast between the explosive dynamism of the early Islamic centuries, when armies and ideas surged from the Arabian Peninsula to forge one of history's most expansive, intellectually vibrant civilizations, and the later eras of fragmentation, internal strife, and external domination. The conviction persists that a return to the ways of the righteous predecessors, or a recapturing of Ummah unity, offers the surest route to renewed ascendancy. This impulse finds institutional form in bodies like the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, which works to promote solidarity among Muslim-majority states. Poetically, it reaches its most stirring expression in the works of Muhammad Iqbal, whose verses pulse with calls to awaken from colonial-induced slumber through images of mountain warriors, desert nomads, and the untamed energy of Islam's formative conquerors. Yet this longing for a golden past is far from unique to Muslim societies. It echoes across civilizations with striking regularity. Hindu nationalist visions of Akhand Bharat, undivided India, conjure a vast cultural and civilizational polity rooted in ancient Vedic and Hindu traditions, imagined as stretching across the subcontinent and beyond through cultural influence. Historical realities complicate this vision. Large swaths of what is now Pakistan and Afghanistan lay within the Achaemenid Persian sphere of direct imperial control during the 6th to 4th centuries BCE, with Indian, Mauryan, or other political dominance more limited or indirect, although cultural and religious currents from the Gangetic Plains undeniably flowed westward, shaping Buddhism, art, and philosophy in the region. In contemporary China, a parallel sentiment appears in official and popular narratives that frame the nation as perennially great, save for the externally imposed century of humiliation, roughly 1839 to 1949, inflicted by Western powers and Japan. Chinese commentators emphasize continuity and resilience, viewing modern resurgence not as revival from ashes, but as restoration after temporary eclipse. From the banks of the Indus to the Mediterranean shores, descendants of once mighty polities hear the same seductive whisper of ancestral achievement, that through remembrance, discipline, and resolve, lost power can be summoned anew. But can such resurrection occur through will alone? This question compels a deeper philosophical and historical inquiry. Empires do not arise solely from collective nostalgia, moral purification, or heroic virtue. The British, Roman, and Achaemenid Persian empires emerged from intricate, often unrepeatable convergences of geography, technological or institutional breakthroughs, demographic surges, ideological cohesion at pivotal moments, and geopolitical vacuums created by the exhaustion or collapse of rivals. Empires are profoundly temporal, children of their specific epoch, shaped by material conditions, contingencies, and path-dependent developments that resist simple replication. To treat history as a repeatable morality play is to fall into an emotional trap born of wounded pride and the universal human desire for one's group to stand ascendant once more. Historical determinism and the rise of civilizations. Empires do not arise simply because people desire greatness, nor do they emerge purely by chance. Their ascent reflects deeper historical forces, geography, technological change, institutional structures, demographic energy, and cultural creativity. The emergence of the Greeks, the Roman Empire, the expansion of the Achaemenid Persian Empire, and the later dominance of the British Empire were each shaped by specific historical environments that cannot be arbitrarily recreated. Geography often proved decisive in determining strategic possibilities. The Mediterranean world enabled Rome to unify surrounding territories through naval and military projection, turning the sea into a Roman lake. The Iranian plateau, with its fertile highlands and central position, allowed Persian rulers to control vital trade and communication routes linking Central Asia, Mesopotamia, and South Asia, facilitating rapid mobilization of satrapies. In the modern era, Britain's island geography and maritime culture encouraged naval supremacy, global trade, and a flexible, outward-oriented society less vulnerable to continental invasions. Historian Niall Ferguson, in Civilization, The West and the Rest, has argued compellingly that Europe's dominance after 1500 resulted from 6 institutional killer applications: scientific inquiry, political competition among states, secure property rights, medical advances, consumer economies, and disciplined work cultures that interacted in a uniquely fertile European context. Britain's island status, combined with naval innovation, exemplified by the defeat of the Spanish Armada in 1588, amplified these advantages into global hegemony. Yet these were never inevitable. They crystallized through contingent alignments of circumstance. This essay meditates on the mechanics of such power, the perils of sentimental revivalism, and the necessity of critical, forward-looking engagement with the past. History's wheel turns according to ruthless logics of cause and effect. Forcing it backward invites futility and, often, self-inflicted wounds. The killer applications. How the West rose. To grasp why empires prove so difficult to revive, one must first examine how they ascend. Narratives of Western dominance frequently invoke innate genius, cultural superiority, or racial destiny. Ferguson offers a more grounded, institutional account, identifying 6 killer applications that, when combined after roughly 1500 CE, propelled Europe, particularly Britain, to global preeminence. Critiques of Ferguson note that his framework can appear Eurocentric or underplay non-Western contributions and internal contradictions, such as the role of coercion and exploitation, yet it remains a powerful materialist lens for understanding institutional divergence. The first was competition. Fragmented Europe, riddled with rival monarchies, city-states and principalities, created Darwinian pressures absent in vast, centralized land empires like the Ottomans, Mughals, or Ming China. Failure invited conquest or obsolescence. Success rewarded relentless innovation in finance, military tactics, shipbuilding, and administration. This competitive dynamism contrasted with the relative stability and occasional stagnation of unified imperial bureaucracies that lacked the same existential incentives for reform. Competition nourished the second, science. The scientific revolution transcended abstract speculation. It forged a methodical, empirical way to interrogate and harness nature. Figures like Isaac Newton exemplified the fusion of theory and practical application. British explorer Captain James Cook's voyages, sponsored by the Royal Society, exemplified science in the direct service of empire. His observation of the 1769 transit of Venus yielded navigational precision that aided Pacific exploration and eventual colonisation of Australia and New Zealand. Science supplied both literal maps and metaphorical tools for mastery over environments and peoples. Third came the rule of law and secure property rights. England's common law tradition protected private ownership, enabling capital accumulation, lending, and risk-taking on an unprecedented scale. This legal foundation birthed the joint stock company, epitomised by the East India Company, which pooled investor resources, diffused risk, and projected corporate power across oceans, ventures impossible without institutional trust in enforceable contracts and impartial adjudication. Fourth was medicine. Advances such as quinine, extracted from South American chinchona bark, neutralized malaria and other tropical diseases, allowing European penetration into Africa's disease-ridden interiors and Asian tropics. Medicine acted as a literal enabler of expansion, drastically reducing mortality rates that had previously confined outsiders to coastal enclaves. Fifth, the consumer society generated demand that fueled the Industrial Revolution. A burgeoning middle class craved cotton textiles, sugar, tea, porcelain, and other exotic goods, creating markets that justified mass production, global supply chains, and factory systems. Consumption was not mere indulgence, but an economic engine driving innovation and trade. Sixth, a distinctive work ethic, often linked by Max Weber to Protestantism's emphasis on disciplined labour, thrift, and reinvestment as signs of divine favour, sustained productivity and capital formation. This cultural framework valorized worldly success through methodical effort rather than fatalism or conspicuous leisure. These apps were not predestined. They crystallized in a specific European context of political fragmentation, intellectual ferment, Renaissance, Reformation, Enlightenment, and maritime orientation. Britain leveraged gunpowder, originally a Chinese invention, alongside these innovations, into unmatched naval and commercial hegemony. The British reached my village Draban in Dera Ismail Khan in 1809 at the foot of the Takht-i Suleiman Mountains. In Draban and Darazinda, I can see the legacy of British Empire: forts, colonial-style mansions, bridges, telephone lines. British came not as divine emissaries, but as bearers of a historically contingent power package: scientific navigation, corporate organisation, disciplined soldiery, and economic incentives forged in Europe's competitive crucible. Empires arise from such confluences, not timeless essences or pure willpower. The British Empire, on which the sun never set, eventually waned, yet its institutional echoes persist in colonial legacies, administrative structures, legal frameworks, infrastructure. The tragic imitation: Italy and Iran. Consider the folly of attempting literal revival in mismatched eras. Imagine, in 2026, English citizens gathering in a Manchester church or school to lament the loss of the Pax Britannica. They pray for the revival of the British Empire. They lament their sins. They lament that they are a mere shadow of the Pax Britannica, the British peace that once spanned the globe. They call for a new East India Company, a new Tennyson to sing of imperial destiny, a new Kipling to urge the white man's burden. Such displays would appear absurd, a fringe exercise in futile nostalgia. British society largely accepts that the conditions enabling a small island to rule a quarter of humanity have passed. The killer applications have diffused globally, and the appetite for formal empire has vanished. Such rituals would be rightly futile, for the structural conditions of 19th century British supremacy, industrial monopoly, unchallenged naval dominance, global trade networks before widespread decolonisation and rival powers, have irrevocably shifted. This absurdity mirrors the historical tragedies of Benito Mussolini's Italy and Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi's Iran, nations intoxicated by ancient grandeur yet blind to history's irreversibility. Mussolini's fascist Italy explicitly sought to resurrect the Roman Empire. Styling himself Duce and a new Caesar, he pursued Mare Nostrum dominance over the Mediterranean. The 1935 invasion of Ethiopia avenged the 1896 defeat at Adwa, framed as restoring Roman prestige. Propaganda glorified Roman legions, roads, aqueducts, and law as models for a modern totalitarian state. Yet Rome's rise relied on unique contingencies. The legion's tactical flexibility in an era of phalanx warfare, republican institutions evolving into imperial administration, citizenship policies integrating conquered peoples, and a Mediterranean political vacuum after the decline of Hellenistic kingdoms and Carthage. By the 20th century, those conditions, pre-industrial military organisation, specific demographic and technological balances, had vanished. Italy lacked Germany's industrial might, scientific infrastructure, or societal cohesion for sustained modern warfare. Italian forces in World War II suffered humiliating setbacks, stalled in Greece, routed in North Africa by smaller British contingents under General Wavell, and ultimately collapsing amid internal strife. Mussolini's theatrical revival, parades, architectural demolitions to unearth Roman ruins, imperial rhetoric, ended in farce and tragedy. His execution and public desecration in Milan in 1945. Fascism appropriated antiquity but could not replicate its causal matrix. Similarly, in 1971, the Shah of Iran orchestrated the lavish 2,500-year celebration of the Persian Empire at Persepolis. Tens to hundreds of millions of dollars funded a tent city, imported French cuisine on Limoges porcelain, and hosted global dignitaries. The Shah invoked Cyrus the Great, Cyrus Cylinder's liberator of Jewish exiles, unifier of Medes and Persians, architect of a tolerant, satrapy-based administration spanning from the Indus to the Balkans, as his spiritual forebear. The event blended ancient symbolism with displays of modern Iranian progress under Pahlavi modernization. Yet it masked deep fissures. A secular, Western-oriented elite versus a traditional, religious populace. Reliance on oil wealth and US support, and Savak's repression. Persepolis' spectacle projected continuity with the Achaemenid first superpower, but Iran's 1971 reality, marked by poverty, illiteracy, and inequality for many, rendered it hollow theatre. Just 8 years later, the 1979 Islamic Revolution toppled the Shah, who fled into exile. An Islamic Republic supplanted the monarchy. Ancient imperial ghosts offered no shield against popular discontent, fueled partly by perceptions of extravagance and cultural alienation. Both cases illustrate the peril of tragic imitation. These leaders reached for Rome, Persepolis through parades, rhetoric, and opulence, ignoring that imperial power stemmed from time-bound innovations. Roman military engineering and citizenship, Persian administrative tolerance amid post-Assyrian/Babylonian vacuums, not eternal national character. History's mechanics, technological shifts, social transformations, economic realities, render such reenactments self-destructive. The unrepeatable Greek moment nowhere does the unrepeatability of historical greatness shine more brightly than in ancient Greece. The classical era, roughly 5th to 4th centuries BCE, produced an intellectual and cultural efflorescence whose light still illuminates global thought. Pre-Socratic philosophers in Ionia, Thales positing water as primary substance and seeking natural explanations for phenomena. Anaximander's Apeiron, the boundless and first known world map. Anaximenes on air's condensation and rarefaction. Heraclitus's doctrine of flux, one cannot step twice into the same river, and strife as cosmic father. Parmenides' unchanging being and Zeno's paradoxes challenging motion and plurality laid foundations for rational inquiry free from myth. Empedocles proposed 4 elements governed by love and strife. Anaxagoras introduced nous, mind, as cosmic orderer. Democritus and Leucippus envisioned atomism in a void. Protagoras' humanism declared, "Man is the measure of all things." This culminated in Socrates' relentless elenchus, Plato's theory of ideal forms in the academy, and Aristotle's encyclopedic synthesis of logic, biology, ethics, politics, and metaphysics, tutoring Alexander the Great. Post-Alexander schools, Stoicism, teaching harmony with nature, Epicureanism pursuing freedom from fear, skepticism suspending judgment, Neoplatonism weaving a metaphysical one, extended these currents for centuries. The iconic encounter of Alexander and Diogenes the Cynic, living in a tub, where the conqueror offered any favour and received only "stand out of my sunlight," symbolises complementary human potentials, worldly conquest versus radical self-sufficiency. This Greek miracle arose from specific conditions, the polis fostering debate and civic participation, synthesis of Mycenaean warrior traditions with Ionian innovation and Dorian elements, geographic fragmentation encouraging experimentation amid trade and colonization, and timing after the Persian Wars, which galvanized cultural confidence. Yet modern Greece, shaped by Roman, Byzantine, Ottoman and Slavic admixtures, operates in a transformed world. No serious observer expects contemporary Athenians to replicate Periclean orators, Platonic dialogues, or Alexandrian conquests en masse. The crucible has cooled. Populations have mixed. Global structures have evolved. Lamenting this is to mourn time's arrow itself. Revivalist movements err when they assume ancestors embodied superior, transhistorical essence, awakenable by will rather than products of irretrievable contexts. Civilizational energy and historical cycles. Spengler, Toynbee, and Ibn Khaldun. Philosophers and historians have long sought to capture civilizational rhythms. Oswald Spengler's The Decline of the West, 1918 to 1922, offers one influential morphology. Spengler viewed cultures not as linear stages of universal progress, but as organic entities, superorganisms, with distinct life cycles, a youthful spring of creativity and flowering, summer maturity, autumnal intellectual harvest, and wintry decline into civilization, a petrified, mechanistic phase of expansion without soulful innovation. Each culture possesses a unique soul or prime symbol. For example, the Western Faustian striving toward infinity versus the classical Apollonian emphasis on harmony, proportion, and visible form. Unfolding in bounded, non-transferable ways across roughly a millennium of vitality, followed by senescence. Spengler drew analogies to plants or animals. Cultures bloom, exhaust their possibilities, and wither, shaped by landscape and destiny rather than universal laws or human agency. Destiny, he insisted, makes history. People do not. The West, in his view, had entered its evening phase akin to late Rome, technologically powerful yet spiritually exhausted. Critics fault Spengler for biological determinism, cultural relativism, and a pessimism that downplays material factors or individual agency, yet his insight endures. Civilizational vitality emerges under particular cultural historical soils and cannot be arbitrarily summoned. Historical energy wanes when internal forms rigidify or external conditions mutate. Arnold Toynbee's A Study of History complements and complicates this with his challenge and response theory. Civilizations arise and grow not through automatic evolution, but through creative responses by a creative minority to successive challenges: environmental, harsh climates, geography, social, internal tensions, or external invasions, competition. Successful responses generate growth. Failure occurs when the creative minority becomes a dominant minority that rules by force rather than inspiration, prompting the rise of an internal proletariat and eventual disintegration. Toynbee analysed 21 civilizations, noting that decline is not inevitable, but results from loss of creative elasticity. Unlike Spengler's organic fatalism, Toynbee allowed more room for human agency. Civilizations can renew through withdrawal and return, or by addressing new challenges creatively. These frameworks resonate deeply with Ibn Khaldun's earlier cyclical theory in the Muqaddimah, 1377, where asabiyya, group solidarity, drives nomadic tribes with strong cohesion to conquer urban civilizations softened by luxury, only for the conquerors themselves to decay and invite new waves. Together, Spengler, Toynbee, and Khaldun underscore a shared truth. Civilizational energy is temporal and conditional, not eternally summonable by nostalgia or willpower. The transformation of power. Power's very nature has transformed, compounding revivalist challenges. Early Islamic expansions, 7th to 8th centuries, rank among history's swiftest. Arab armies, motivated by faith, mobility, camel logistics, and exquisite timing, toppled exhausted Byzantine and Sassanid Persian empires weakened by mutual warfare, establishing dominion from Iberia to Central Asia. For many, this era symbolizes peak Muslim agency, unity, martial vigor, and a universal message filling power vacuums. Modern power, however, prioritizes economic productivity, scientific research, technological innovation, educated workforces, and institutional adaptability over sheer territorial conquest or religious mobilization. Influence flows from Silicon Valley laboratories, Shanghai factories, financial hubs like London or Singapore, and universities driving AI, biotechnology, and renewable energy. Military strength persists, but increasingly depends on these foundations: precision munitions, cyber capabilities, economic sanctions, drone swarms, rather than massed infantry or cavalry. In an interconnected global economy, soft power, cultural appeal, diplomatic networks, media dominance, and resilience to disruption, supply chain security, demographic stability, matter profoundly. Romanticizing sword-based triumphs risks neglecting the patient investments in human capital, education systems, and knowledge ecosystems essential today. Gunpowder once equalized battlefields. Today, algorithms, satellites, and venture capital do. Civilizational memory and the modern nation-state. Political organization has also evolved dramatically. Islamic history featured expansive empires and caliphates governing diverse populations, with the Ummah as a transcendent ideal transcending borders. The post-Westphalian order, post-1648, however, centers sovereign nation-states operating via diplomacy, trade agreements, international law, and multilateral institutions. Pakistan, Turkey, Indonesia, Malaysia, and others function within this framework, where success hinges less on recreating supranational caliphates than on building robust national institutions. Quality education. Diversified economies. rule of law, scientific infrastructure, and accountable governance. Memory of past empires provides inspiration and identity, but effective navigation demands adaptation to contemporary realities, global supply chains, digital connectivity, demographic transitions, climate challenges, rather than wholesale replication of medieval or early modern forms. Attempts to impose older models onto the nation-state often generate internal contradictions or external isolation. Iqbal and the Consequences of an Unconscious Memoir. The Muslim Case. At the Meditation's core stands Muhammad Iqbal, 1877 to 1938, whose diagnosis of Muslim decline and vision of revival demand nuanced scrutiny. Applying Nietzsche's observation that great philosophies often constitute involuntary autobiographies, personal confessions driven by hidden wounds, longings, and impulses, Iqbal's thought emerges as a profound personal response amid colonial trauma. Born in Sialkot under British rule, he witnessed the Mughal Empire's dismantling after 1857, Muslim elite displacement, Urdu's demotion, and cultural marginalisation. His poetry counters this humiliation with vivid evocations of Bedouin restlessness, mountain fortitude, and the Mahdi Momin, ideal believer, a dynamic figure blending lion-hearted courage, eagle-like vision, and unyielding patience. Central is Khudi, selfhood or ego, not crude individualism, but a spiritually attuned, assertive personality, realizing its potential through alignment with divine will, rejecting passive fatalism or Sufi self-annihilation. Verses from works like Bangidara and Bali Jibril urge Muslims to awaken Khudi as a world-conquering force. Iqbal exalted the early conquest's martial energy and faith-driven action, projecting vitality onto a community of administrators, landowners, and intellectuals feeling diminished. Yet his emphasis sometimes overshadowed the later Abbasid, Fatimid, Umayyad in Spain, and Andalusian Golden Age's intellectual achievements, the era when Muslim societies originated and advanced knowledge, compelling European engagement. Polymaths like Ibn Sina, Avicenna, authored the Canon of Medicine, Europe's medical standard into the 17th century, pioneered impetus concepts prefiguring inertia, distinguished force and motion, and devised the floating man thought experiment, a fully formed human suspended in void, blindfolded, sensorially deprived, who nonetheless affirms self-existence, anticipating Descartes by centuries while exploring consciousness and soul. Avicenna advanced contingency-based proofs for God and metaphysics influencing scholasticism. Ibn Rushd, Averroes, commented magisterially on Aristotle, proposing the unity of intellect, a shared eternal mind, provoking Latin Averroism and church condemnations. 1270-1277. Testimony to Islamic philosophy's impact on Europe. Al-Khwarizmi systematized algebra, yielding algorithm. Scholars refined trigonometry, geometry, and transmitted Indian numerals and decimals. Ibn Khaldun's Muqaddimah founded historiography and sociology via Asabiyya. Ibn Tufail's Hayy ibn Yaqzan portrayed rational self-discovery through observation, influencing European empiricism and novels like Robinson Crusoe. Ibn al-Haytham, Alhazen, revolutionized optics with his Book of Optics, 1021, introducing experimental methodology, the camera obscura, and a theory of vision based on light rays entering the eye, foundational to modern physics and cited by Newton and Descartes. Al-Biruni, a polymath and early anthropologist, produced Tariq al-Hind, a pioneering ethnographic study of India, and advanced geodesy and astronomy. Al-Farabi classified sciences systematically, bridging philosophy and faith. These figures, along with surgeons like Abu al-Qasim al-Zahrawi and engineers like al-Jazari, made the Golden Age creative, not merely transmissive. Centers in Baghdad's House of Wisdom, Cairo, and Cordoba exported innovations in optics, surgery, astronomy, and more. Contemporary discourse sometimes reduces these figures, Avicenna to folk healer, or oddly retrofits non-Muslims like Alexander as Muslim. Warrior archetypes have occasionally eclipsed scholar cosmopolitans. Iqbal's unconscious memoir, forged in humiliation, channeled revivalism toward martial Qudi and 7th century spirit. Later Islamist, Deobandi, Salafi or militant currents often amplified this, prioritizing armed purity to reenact early triumphs. Yet such efforts, detached from era-specific conditions, exhausted rivals, logistical superiority, compelling ideology amid vacuum, frequently yielded bloodshed without sustainable renewal. The sword enabled initial expansion but required intellectual openness, trade networks, and administration for endurance, qualities defining the Golden Age. Overemphasis on jihadist revival has sometimes sidelined the patient, inclusive inquiry that once made Baghdad and Cordoba beacons, reversing knowledge flows toward the West. A call for critical thought, honouring the past without replicating it. The pattern recurs across history. The seduction of the Golden Age fosters belief that willpower, ritual purity, or symbolic reenactment can resurrect ancestral dominance. British diffusion via institutions, Roman/Persian theatrical revivals, and Napoleonic echoes, Chinese pragmatic continuity, and Iqbal-influenced Muslim currents all collide with history's impersonal mechanics. Geography, demography, technology, ideology, timing, and cyclical energies described by Spengler, Toynbee, and Khaldun. The wiser path, for Muslims or any civilization, eschews lament, martial cosplay, or grievance in favour of ruthless critical intelligence. Dissect empire's contingencies. Persia's satrapies and tolerance amid conquest, Rome's legions and law, Britain's apse and naval culture, early Islam's timing and mobility, the Greek polis's fertile fragmentation. Then map analogous present advantages. By 2026, many non-Western societies wield science, economies, and connectivity. The imperative is innovation upon enduring legacies, empirical reason, institutional creativity, openness, rather than Abbasid caliphates, Mughal courts, or legions. Successful modern adaptations, such as post-war Japan's technological leap, South Korea's export-driven miracle, or Singapore's pragmatic fusion of discipline and global markets, demonstrate that critical engagement with present realities yields results where pure revivalism falters. Honour the Muslim Golden Age by reviving its inquiring ethos, Avicenna's metaphysics and self-awareness experiments, Averroes's bold Aristotelianism, Al-Khwarizmi's algorithmic rigour, Ibn Khaldun's cyclical sociology, Ibn Tufal's empirical solitude, Alhazen's experimental optics, Al-Biruni's cross-cultural inquiry. Colonial encounters, like British arrival in Draban near Dera Ismail Khan, stemmed not from divine election, but era-specific forces. Legacies, administrative, legal, infrastructural, warrant critical appraisal, extraction alongside unintended modernization. The golden past is a repository of lessons, inspirations, and cautionary tales, not a literal template. Conflating the two courts decline. History proceeds via cause and effect. Wisdom discerns patterns, extracts universals, value of competition, inquiry, secure institutions, creative responses to challenges, and builds anew. In an era of artificial intelligence, hyperconnectivity, multipolar shifts, and environmental crises, emotional revivalism postpones the disciplined labour of creation. The wheel turns inexorably. True resurrection lies not in dead empires, but in rekindling the dynamic, critical, inquiring spirit that once propelled them, and can forge unprecedented achievements. Face forward with clear vision, steady hands, and unyielding commitment to understanding reality as it is, not as sentiment wishes it to have remained. Only then can civilizations transcend the seduction of the Golden Age and claim a future worthy of their past.